What are your night shift horror stories? Many years ago, I worked at a regional radio station in the middle of freaking nowhere, Australia. I was the overpass operator, keep the overpass playlist running, set up for the morning, do all the manual checks for the next day, and jump on the desk if anything funky happens. I spent a lot of time sitting in what was essentially a tin shed in the middle of a paddock, with my dog, shoes off, listening to 50s and 60s music, and doing crossword puzzles. Except one night, when the roo shooters came through. They spooked the kangaroos in the paddock, and one of them jumped headfirst through our office window. So there's me, barefoot and half asleep, when this 6 feet tall kangaroo smashes through the glass window. Blood and glass everywhere. My dog starts chasing the kangaroo, I'm chasing my dog, and the kangaroo bounds around the office, knocking crap off desks in the dark, bleeding everywhere. I ran and opened the studio bay doors, and my dog chased it outside, where, I'm assuming, the poor thing, the kangaroo, was shot. Then I had to call my boss. I was once staying late doing some scenic painting in a college campus theater. It was late, pitch black dark outside and very quiet in the building. A few of us were up on the stage, not really talking, just taking care of business when suddenly I saw out of the corner of my eye something go very quickly by the open door to the lobby. WTF. Then it went by again, and I actually saw what it was. A guy with long hair, wearing pajamas, and no socks or shoes. He was tiptoeing in a very exaggerated way, pulling his knees up very high, and grinning. WTF. It sounds kinda funny, but it was creepy as hell. We all made eye contact, and one of the other painters was just about to go shut the door when the dude walked right in. He stood there staring at us for a full minute. You could have heard a pin drop. He threw his arms out to the sides dramatically and said, "I'm your savior, Jesus Christ." No one responded and he eventually walked out. I guess he was hoping to get more of a reaction. The door was promptly shut and locked behind him and security called. They were not impressed. Turns out that he was a patient at some sort of group home nearby and had done this multiple times. I still get creeped out to this day if I'm working in a theater at night though. I worked in a residential treatment center for teen girls. One girl with some severe trauma, rape, abuse, came sleepwalking into the room screaming to please untie her while clawing at her wrists. She was begging me to help her because he's torturing me. I sat her down and pulled her bracelets and watch off. She went completely limp, then got up and went back to bed. It freaked me out seeing the raw emotion of her trauma, since she was always smiling and relatively calm during the day. Another time I was doing my nightly checks and a guy suddenly walked out from behind the door coming at me. I screamed and threw my flashlight at him. It was a smiley face balloon. Worked night shift at a large grocery store, one that wasn't open overnight, but had a skeleton crew to work the loads and do prep and clean. I worked near the entrance, large glass doors, but visually blocked off from my vantage point. Around 3 AM, I hear knocking on the doors. This isn't completely uncalled for. Usually it's someone coming in for an early shift, but didn't have a key card. Sometimes it's someone's food delivery, or sometimes a customer who thinks we are open despite clearly being closed. I approach the door. It's a man that I don't recognize, wet from the rain. He looks normal enough, but something about him unnerved me. He had that vibe to him, you know, the one where it seems like maybe they are on their way to becoming a full-blown meth head, but for now they still manage to give the appearance of functionality. He was holding his shit together just enough to appear normal, but the edges were definitely shaky. Anyway, without unlocking the door, I announced that the store was closed. He told me that he just needed my help. His car had broken down in the parking lot and he needed a boost. I didn't drive, so I told him I couldn't help him. I should have walked away there, but he was out in the rain and I did legitimately feel bad. So I told him I would see if any one of our few crew did drive. I did find someone who was willing to help and got the night crew manager involved as well. We went out. Turns out he was parked a bit off from the entrance in a fairly secluded spot and he had a lady with him. There was a similar vibe with her, almost but not exactly normal. It didn't click right away, but I figured they had been hooking up in the car in the parking lot, maybe left the radio or lights on, and drained the battery. To me, that explained the weird unnerving feeling. They either felt ashamed or guilty, and it was showing through. Anyway, my coworker goes over to help give them a boost. The manager and I stay out there with him, nearby, watching. The two lovebirds kept peeking over at us a bit uncomfortably. After a few moments, the coworker returns from the car and hurries us back inside. We don't see them drive off, which seems odd. We get inside, lock up again, and then the coworker thanks us for staying out there with him and not leaving him alone with them. He also caught on to the unnerving air about them, and it made him worried. What worried him more was when it also turned out that there was nothing wrong with their car. Used to work night shift at a middle school. Every night while cleaning out the boys' locker room I would hear at least one locker slam shut, sometimes more. This creeped me out when I started, but after a couple of months I got used to it. One night while cleaning one of the girls' locker room, I heard a girl scream. I walked out of the locker room, even looked outside the building, didn't see anybody. Before that I worked at the high school. I'd randomly hear doors open and close. Nowadays I work day shift at another school. About a year ago I just got to the building to begin my shift. It was still dark out, and I was turning on all the lights. When I walked by the main office I heard what sounded like someone ransacking the place. Papers being tossed. I heard what sounded like a table or file cabinet being dragged. I remember my first thought was, man, somebody must have lost something important. Then I clicked. It was 6 in the morning, and it was either Thanksgiving or Christmas break, meaning there was no school and there shouldn't be anybody in there. Took me a second to work up the courage to go in and check it out. When I did, nobody was there and nothing was out of place. Finally, last month I get a call from dispatch at 3 AM. The fire alarm was going off, and they needed somebody to go turn it off. As soon as I walk in I freak out. The alarm is blaring, but what scared me was the strobe light that flashes with the alarm. The building was pitch black, except every other second when that strobe lit the halls up. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie, where they're looking for the killer. I was half expecting to see someone pop up out of nowhere when the halls lit up. Used to work night shift at a 24-hour Walmart. Customers are nuts enough in the daytime, but they become weird after midnight. Once had an elderly guy come in wearing only a jean jacket and fishnet stockings. He came up to my register, leaned in, and asked if we carried anything to get rid of lice. Those plastic barriers all stores have now to protect cashiers. They need to keep those even after the pandemic ends. I lost count of the times customers got into my personal space to ask about products for fleas, lice, rashes, etc. Was an orderly in a hospital. Two of us were sitting in the basement office adjacent to the morgue. A guy passed our office, looking at us a little shifty, came back again, and asked if we had access to the morgue. We said yes, thinking he was doing a pickup for a funeral home, but that seemed strange given it was around 12 o'clock to 12:30 AM. Nope. He wanted to pay us to let him in and leave him alone with the bodies for an hour. We escorted him up to security. Apparently he had tried it in the past, as security knew him. Worked a parking garage at the airport, cleaning the top deck, and noticed about 100 ravens all over a truck with a tarp over the bed. Took my flashlight expecting something awful. Noticed as I got closer the smell and the ravens taking turns going in a hole they had torn open and popping out covered in gunk. Some guy left a broke down beater with a couple animal carcasses in the back to rot. No heads. Checked the logs and the damn truck had been there since November, and it was April, so everything was just thawing and breaking down. It was 3 AM. Popular Canadian coffee shop. There is one old baker in the back that rarely interacts with me past a dirty joke or a dirty ditty from his Navy days. Other than that I'm alone. Not another soul around the area and I expect it to remain so for at least an hour yet. I'm boxing up the day olds for the homeless shelter when I swear I see something out of the corner of my eye. It's behind me. I turn, then look down. There's a small child standing there. A native little toddler with a fork staring at me intensely. I'm struck dumb with how absurd the situation is. How did he get behind the counter? I didn't hear the door open or see him come through the counter. I scan the storefront. No one. I yell for the baker in case he has a friend or something visiting that lost their kid. He comes over and, like me, does a double take at the kid and is baffled. Kid starts muttering incoherently. I get him a glass of water and a donut hole and the baker runs out of the store to do a perimeter of the block. I call the non-emergency line and explain I have a little kid with no parents. I can't get any information from the boy, just mumbles I can't make out. Police arrive. Baker comes back, says that he can't find anyone else in the streets. The guy from the 24/7 corner store said he'll keep an eye out. Police try to speak to the kid and also get nothing but mutterings and half-hearted gestures. They take him away. I see them again for their morning coffee, and they told me the little guy walked several kilometers from the nearest reservation in the dead of night to my store. He had got into his parents' medicine cabinet and just walked out of the house. I'm floored. It must have taken that poor baby hours to get to me. Seeing him behind me like that in the dead of the night still shakes me. Spooked me more than the guy that threw a pot of coffee at me, the woman that tried to stab me with a plastic spoon because I refused to give her a metal one, and the dude that waited around for 4 hours hoping to catch me alone so he could teach me a lesson since I didn't have the flavor of bajol he wanted. Warning: medical gross stuff incoming. I worked in an emergency room. The worst night that comes to mind involves a patient that was bitten by a baby timber rattlesnake. He was bleeding out of every single orifice by the time he got to us. More blood than I'd ever seen before outside of a motorcycle versus 75 mph head first to asphalt. I don't remember how many doses of Crawford we gave him, but it was the hospital's entire supply. But trying to get him stabilized, arranging the helicopter transport to a bigger and better equipped facility, all the blood, those weren't the worst parts. The worst part was when the patient lost control of his bowels. I will never ever forget that smell. I spent the entire time standing by the door with a battery powered fan and a handful of gauze pads saturated with cinnamon oil trying to reduce some of the smell. The doctor occasionally stuck her head out, just so I could waft the cinnamon oil in her face. Yes, by some miracle, the patient did end up surviving, and as far as I know he made a full recovery. But the blood, the smell, and just the shock of it all. Yeah, never underestimate a baby timber rattlesnake. I worked in an open quarry mine down in Texas. We had this storm where it rained like a mother freaker for hours and hours. Being night shift, 6:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. supervisor, I was in charge of 8 Cat 745 haul trucks, 2 Cat 390 excavators, 6 Cat 980 loaders, 2 D8 dozers, and 1 D9 dozer. It was about 2 a.m. when I had 3 haul trucks get stuck in the bottom of the mine, just spinning their tires endlessly. It was horrible. Since we are talking about tens of thousands of dollars of production per shift, I had to get permission to shut the mine down from the superintendent and relay that to the supervisors up in the plant that washes/dries the material, frac sand. They wouldn't shut down because I said so. I called him at minimum 13 times within an hour to get him to shut the mine down. Since it was 2 a.m., he never answered, which never happened as he always had his phone on. 3 to 4 of us were soaking wet and covered from head to toe in mud to the point where you couldn't even tell we were wearing neon green high-vis safety gear. We got the trucks pulled out of the mine after roughly 3 hours of using a combo of the dozers and loaders and excavators to essentially build a new road from dry materials. The superintendent got in at 6 a.m. for the 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. shift, took one look at the mine, and shut it down for the day. Turns out his phone charger came unplugged and his phone died in the middle of the night. Never knew I called.